Hello and welcome back, and today I want to talk about The Last of Us. And as Season 2 is just around the corner, let's look back at Season 1 and see what changes they made while adapting the first game of The Last of Us. So let's jump right into this with number 1, and they changed the origin of the Cordyceps. In the game, we don't know much about the origin other than it is connected to chocolate, and it is from South America. But in the show, they expanded upon this, saying it's done with grain, and that it is from Jakarta, Indonesia. And number 2, they also changed when the outbreak happened. In the original game, the outbreak was in September 2013 when the game released. However, in the show, the outbreak happens in 2003. And the reason why they changed this for the show is because of series co-creator Craig Mason suggested that they do this so that the main storyline takes place in 2023 when the show released, so that fans can connect to the story more. And number 3 is that they changed how the Cordyceps work in the adaptation. In the original game, the Cordyceps spread through spores, and there were sections in the game where you would have to put on a mask. And actually in the game, this is how they prove Ellie is immune when she breathes the spores in. However, in the show, they dropped the spores because real life, spores would not do what they did in games, and everyone would be infected all the time. So it wouldn't really work in adaptation, so they dropped it, and that's why Ellie gets bit in episode 2, so they could prove, oh, Ellie is immune, and they replace the spores part of the Cordyceps with a mycelium network, which we only ever see in episode 2. However, it means that all infected are connected through an underground network of Cordyceps fungus. We also actually got tentacles coming out of the infected's mouth, which was not in the source material. And number 4 is that Joel and Tommy's relationship is completely different between the two versions of The Last of Us. In the show, it's the big driver through why Joel wants to leave Boston. He wants to go and find his brother Tommy because he's gone dark. However, in the game, Tommy and Joel do not talk. They haven't talked for years. They don't like each other. There's a resentment between the two. And the whole reason Joel leaves Boston in the game is so that he can get guns back, because he is way more of a bad guy in the game. They definitely tried to humanize him a lot more in the show, and that's why they made Joel and Tommy have a closer relationship in the adaptation than the source material, where Tommy is not even mentioned until the back half of the game when he is finally reunited with Joel. And number 5, Robert's death is completely different between both mediums. In the original game, Robert is a way bigger character. He's around for the first hour or 2. He's the first antagonist of the game, and he's actually killed by Joel and Tess after he is tortured when they are trying to find their guns. However, in the adaptation, Robert is literally in one scene alive, and the next time you see Robert, when Joel and Tess are trying to get their battery, he is already dead after the conflict with the Fireflies. And as we are talking about deaths, looking at number 6, Tess's death was also changed between the adaptation and the source material. In the original game, Tess actually dies from Fedra when they're at the Capitol building. Fedra actually comes to the building, and Tess makes a last stand as she's already bitten and fights off Fedra while Joel and Ellie escape. However, in the adaptation, they get rid of Fedra and Tess has to stay back as the infected are coming, and we see that Tess blows herself up after kissing some infected. And moving on, number 7, Frank and Bill are completely different in both mediums. And Frank is almost a show exclusive character. In the games, Frank is literally in one scene and he is already dead. He's a corpse, hanged himself after being bitten many times. However, in the show, they decided to not adapt any of the Frank storyline and Bill's storyline, and decided to instead tell their own story of Frank and Bill throughout the years, which ends with both characters dying. However, back to the game, Bill actually survives the events of The Last of Us and goes on with his life, and it's a shame that Ellie never met Bill, as in the game they have some really great and iconic interactions with each other. And number 8 is that Sam is completely different between both mediums. In the original game, Sam is not deaf and is actually the same age as Ellie and has a crush on Ellie. However, they changed this for the show because they wanted Sam to be way more dependent on Henry and is unable to do anything without him. And moving on, number 9 is that Joel and Ellie never actually go to Jackson during the events of The Last of Us Part 1. We see it right at the end of the game, but we never actually go into it. And Joel and Ellie actually reunite with Tommy at a dam, not at Jackson. And the dam is actually Easter egged in the episode, but Joel and Ellie walk on past it and end up being taken to Jackson, where a lot of the same things happen, it's just a completely different location. And finally, number 10, the Firefly ambush actually happens completely different in both mediums. In the original game, the Firefly ambush in Salt Lake City actually happens to Joel and Ellie right after a near-death experience, where Joel is trying to resuscitate Ellie after Ellie has taken on a lot of water and has become unresponsive, because Joel is not doing what the Fireflies say. They knock him out, and that's how they end up at the hospital. However, in the show, there is no near-death experience for Joel and Ellie, and they are actually caught off guard by the Fireflies and just randomly attacked while they are just walking along talking to each other. And those are 10 differences between the original game and the first season of The Last of Us. So please tell me down below, do you think I missed any other differences? I know there's a lot more out there, like the whole thing with the hunters, but I decided to stick with just 10, so please tell me down below. Do you want more videos like this, or do you think this is it for The Last of Us for now? So this is it for me today, so goodbye, peace out, and I'll talk to you later.